Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm just so glad you're here with us right now because we are taking a shared journey into a subject that quietly governs, well, almost
Yeah.
every interaction you have, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're talking about human behavior today, specifically um, the mechanics of trust. We're going to examine a piece of source material that comes from a very old text.
Yeah.
But by the time we finish unpacking it, I promise you it's going to feel like a dynamic that could have played out yesterday, like right in your own office or your neighborhood.
It really is a remarkable piece of storytelling. Our source material today is episode 18 from a classic collection of tales known as the Kathasaritsagara.
It's quite a title.
It is.
Yeah.
And the episode itself is titled The Merchant's Ring, The Fragility of Trust. And just to set the tone right out of the gate, our goal here isn't to moralize. We aren't offering some kind of preachy fable for you to...
Yeah, no lectures here.
Exactly. Instead, we're using this specific, really elegant story about a prince, a merchant, and a misplaced ring as an analytical lens. It functions as this brilliant case study on community dynamics, the psychology of suspicion, and, well, how incredibly fragile a good reputation actually is.
I am really looking forward to this because the core components we're looking at, how we judge others, how quickly we form suspicions, those really haven't evolved much over the century.
No, they haven't. Human nature is remarkably consistent.
So to give us the lay of the land, can you just walk us through the actual events of this episode? Like, how does this story set up this conflict?
Sure. The authors paint a very vivid picture. The setting is a bustling town, so you have to imagine a place filled with noise, constant commerce, just a really dense network of people.
Lots of word of mouth happening.
Oh, constant talking. And right in the center of this economic hub is a young merchant. The text makes a point to note that while his physical shop was small, his reputation was incredibly strong. He's universally known throughout this busy town for his absolute, unwavering honesty.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, in a busy trading center where deals are happening all day, your word is essentially your currency. So his honesty isn't just a nice trait, it's his primary business asset.
Precisely. He has spent his entire life building that asset. But then, the inciting incident occurs. A prince from the local palace visits this humble shop.
Okay, so the ultimate VIP customer.
The biggest VIP you could get. He purchases a highly valuable ring. And as the transaction concludes, the prince looks at the merchant and explicitly states, "This ring is important to me."
Oh, wow. Okay, so he's not just buying a trinket, he is laying down an emotional stake.
He is. And that emotional stake is exactly what drives the conflict. A few days pass, and the prince returns to the small shop deeply troubled.
Not a good sign.
No. He announces, "My ring is missing." But he doesn't stop at merely stating his problem. The text illustrates how quickly suspicion takes over his rationale. He looks directly at this notoriously honest merchant and levels an accusation. He says, "It must have disappeared from your shop."
Wow, that is a massive escalation.
It really is.
How does the merchant handle that? I have to imagine someone whose entire livelihood relies on honesty would, I don't know, aggressively defend themselves against an authority figure threatening their business.
You would completely expect a fierce defense. But the text highlights a very different reaction. The merchant is shocked, certainly, but he doesn't shout. He doesn't demand an investigation. He replies calmly, simply stating, "I did not touch it."
I have to assume a calm denial to a royal figure doesn't just make the problem magically go away.
It definitely doesn't. In fact, the source text explicitly notes that suspicion spreads faster than truth.
Of course it does.
Right. The prince's accusation leaks out of the shop. Within days, whispers sweep across the entire town. The community begins murmuring. And the text actually provides the specific things people were saying. Things like, "We thought he was honest," and "perhaps we were wrong."
Just instantly turning on him.
Yes, the strong reputation the merchant spent years building just begins to evaporate.
That is brutal. But there is a resolution eventually, right? Does the merchant get vindicated?
He does, but notably, not through his own actions. Several days later, back at the palace, a servant rushes into the prince's chamber with an urgent update. He says, "My lord, the ring has been found."
Wait, where was it? If the merchant didn't take it, who fenced it?
Nobody took it. It wasn't stolen at all. The servant found the ring sitting in a small box inside the prince's very own chamber.
You are kidding me.
The prince had placed it there himself and simply forgotten.
Oh, wow. A completely mundane memory lapse.
A very standard human error, yes, but an error with severe external consequences. To his credit, though, once the prince realizes his mistake, he walks straight back to the merchant shop. He approaches the young man and offers a direct admission. He says, "I owe you an apology."
And what happens next is what I find most compelling about this entire text. The merchant doesn't demand reparations. He doesn't insist the prince go stand in the town square and clear his name.
No, he doesn't.
The text tells us he just smiled gently and delivered a rather haunting response. He says, "The ring has returned, but trust takes longer."
That single line encapsulates the entire philosophical weight of the episode.
Okay, let's unpack this, because there is a lot going on beneath the surface of those events. Let's start with the text observation that suspicion spreads faster than truth. How is it that one completely unverified accusation from the prince was able to infect an entire town before anyone bothered to check the facts?
It really comes down to the mechanics of how human beings process information, particularly sensational information. Suspicion requires zero evidence to take root. It only requires a suggestion.
Just a spark.
Exactly, like a spark in dry grass. The truth, however, is heavy. It's bureaucratic. It requires verification. It requires someone actively searching a palace chamber. It requires time.
It makes me think about how modern rumors operate online. It's like a fake one-star review on a restaurant app.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. Someone can post a completely fabricated review claiming they got terrible food poisoning.
Yeah.
It takes 30 seconds to write, and the algorithm pushes it to hundreds of people instantly. Bookings drop overnight.
Yes, the damage is immediate.
Meanwhile, the restaurant owner has to contact the platform, prove the account is a bot, wait for a moderation team to review the case. That process takes weeks.
That is a highly accurate parallel. The lie is frictionless, but the truth encounters endless friction. You can see that contrast clearly in the text timeline. The spread of the prince's doubt is immediate. The whispers start almost the moment he leaves the shop, but the arrival of the truth, that comes with a multi-day delay.
Right, because it took days for the servant to happen upon that small box.
And during all those days, the merchant was living the fallout of a destroyed reputation. He was dealing with the reality of his ruined good name while the facts were still slowly making their way across town.
It really makes you evaluate the shared human struggle of dealing with rumors. If you've ever been the subject of a misunderstanding at work, or even if you've been the one listening to gossip about a neighbor, it is alarming how easily a tiny seed of doubt changes your perception of someone, long before any proof is presented.
What's fascinating here is how the authors deliberately juxtapose the merchant's established reputation with the town's immediate reaction. Consider the setup again. The text is unambiguous. His reputation was strong. He had a proven, observable track record of honesty in that bustling town.
I hear that, but wouldn't a lifetime of honest actions act like an armor? If he had such a strong foundation, shouldn't the townspeople have given him the benefit of the doubt, at least for a few days?
You would certainly hope so. But what this story illustrates is the inherent fragility of reputation within a community. A reputation isn't a physical asset you can lock in a vault. It is entirely a collective perception.
It only exists in other people's heads.
Exactly. It exists only in the minds of the crowd. And because it relies on consensus, it is highly vulnerable to sudden shifts in social winds, especially when the accusation originates from a figure of authority.
The authority factor does seem to short-circuit everyone's logic. The prince represents power and status, so when he speaks, the townspeople subconsciously weigh his panicked, unverified words as somehow more credible than the merchant's entire verifiable life history.
It exposes a rather uncomfortable reality about the communities we all inhabit, whether that is a professional network, a social circle, or a physical neighborhood. We find comfort in the idea that consistent good behavior protects us from false narratives.
We want to believe that doing the right thing keeps us safe.
We really do. Yet the town's reaction whispering, "We thought he was honest," demonstrates that collective loyalty is highly conditional. The community was willing to discard their long-held belief in the merchant the very moment an authority figure introduced a competing narrative.
That is a chilling thought. Your life's work, your character, is essentially at the mercy of a crowd's fleeting opinion. Which brings me to the prince himself. Here's where it gets really interesting. Look at his behavior when he first realizes the ring is gone. He didn't even attempt to retrace his steps.
He completely bypassed his own memory.
He didn't stop to think, did I leave it in the palace? His immediate reflexive action was to externalize the blame. He points directly at the merchant and says, "It must have disappeared from your shop." Why do we do that?
This touches on a very common cognitive blind spot, particularly when we are under stress. When we lose something valuable, a physical object, a major client at work, a relationship, our brains naturally seek a scapegoat to alleviate the cognitive load of the crisis.
to avoid the vulnerability of admitting a mistake.
Exactly that. It is psychologically much easier and far less painful to convince ourselves that someone else has wronged us than it is to pause, look inward, and investigate our own carelessness.
Right.
The prince had already established that the ring was highly important to him. Losing it caused acute distress.
Yeah.
In that distress, acknowledging that he might be responsible was just too heavy a burden, so his brain took a shortcut to blame.
We've all been there on some level. You misplace your car keys when you're late for work, and your first thought is usually, who moved my keys? Rather than, where did I carelessly drop them?
Oh.
But the source text pulls a vital lesson from this flaw. It states, judgment should wait for clarity. The prince's fatal error wasn't forgetting where he put the ring. His fatal error was weaponizing his spoken words while he was still confused.
He transformed his internal panic into an external accusation. And words, especially accusations of theft, cannot be unspoken. The text explicitly notes that words can damage trust and suspicion must be handled carefully. The prince was reckless with his suspicion, and that recklessness resulted in severe collateral damage.
Which leads us to the emotional core of this entire episode, the merchant's experience. Let's examine his journey, because the way he handles this is quietly devastating. When the accusation is leveled, the text says he is shocked, yet he replies calmly. Why do you think he didn't fight back harder?
His calmness is a profound display of stoicism. But we shouldn't mistake that calm exterior for a lack of internal suffering. He recognizes instantly that arguing with an agitated prince will not produce the ring, nor will it quell the prince's anxiety.
But the true damage to this merchant wasn't about the ring at all, or even financial ruin. The prince didn't ask for a refund. The real damage was the emotional toll of having his identity stripped away while he was powerless to stop it.
The isolation must have been suffocating. Imagine his daily reality. He knows he is completely innocent, yet he has to wake up every morning, open his small shop, and endure the sideways glances from his neighbors.
Just brutal.
He has to hear the muffled whispers of, perhaps we were wrong, from the very people he has served with integrity for years. The punishment isn't the accusation itself. The punishment is the powerlessness.
That context makes the final interaction between the two men so heavy. The prince comes in, humbled, and says, I owe you an apology. A lot of people in the merchant's position would have exploded. They would have gloated or expressed rage or demanded the prince hire a town crier to clear his name.
Yet the merchant does none of those things. The text says he simply smiled gently.
I find that smile fascinating. It doesn't read as a happy smile to me. It feels incredibly sorrowful.
It is a smile of deep melancholy. It's the reaction of a man who has just gained a sobering understanding of human nature. He isn't angry anymore because anger implies a desire to fight for a return to the status quo. His gentle smile suggests he realizes the status quo is gone forever.
Right. Things can never go back to the way they were.
The prince's apology, while necessary and genuine, doesn't act as a magic eraser. It doesn't instantly repair the psychological damage or immediately reset the town's perception.
The toothpaste is out of the tube. And that is exactly what he communicates to the prince. The ring is returned, but trust takes longer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the episode elevates from a simple narrative into a profound philosophical observation. Consider the closing reflection provided in the text. Objects can be recovered easily, but trust between people, once shaken, takes time to rebuild.
So what does this all mean? For you, listening to this right now, it really prompts us to examine how we handle the unknown in our own lives. When you are faced with missing information, and maybe a close friend seems suddenly distant, or a collaborative project at work goes sideways without explanation, do you have the discipline to wait for clarity? Or do you allow assumptions, either in your own head or at the water cooler, to fill the void?
It is a significant challenge to our natural instincts. Waiting for clarity is inherently uncomfortable because it requires sitting with uncertainty. But the alternative is what we witnessed in that bustling town, a rush to judgment that fractures trust. And trust is the invisible infrastructure holding every relationship together.
It holds everything up.
Once you introduce a crack into that foundation, pouring an apology over it doesn't instantly seal it. The structural integrity has been compromised, and rebuilding it is an active, ongoing effort.
That ties perfectly into the source's broader lesson, that truth often arrives slowly. We have to grant truth the time it needs to materialize before we start dismantling someone's character.
It requires us to be exceptionally mindful of our language, especially under pressure. The prince could have easily said, I have misplaced my ring. Could it have fallen somewhere in your shop? That is a statement of fact that invites collaboration. Instead, he chose, "It must have disappeared from your shop."
A huge difference.
That is an accusation that guarantees alienation.